never thought I'd almost die because of a breakup and a hiking app. But there I was, thirsty, freezing, and screaming at Google Maps in the middle of the damn Oregon wilderness. Recalculating route, the robotic voice said for the 5th time, which felt like the universe mocking me. My name's Ethan. 26, copywriter, city boy through and through. My idea of adventure is trying a new coffee flavor. So when my ex, Ryan, posted those perfect photos of him and his new boyfriend backpacking through national parks, I snapped. I told myself I could do it too. I booked a flight to Portland, rented a car, and drove into the green abyss thinking I'd find myself. What I found instead was hypothermia and regret. It had been raining for hours, and the trail markers were gone. My phone battery was dying, my fingers were numb, and the fog was swallowing everything. That's when I heard the sound of hooves. I froze. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. Then, through the mist, a figure appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark rain jacket and a wide-brimmed hat. He rode a horse like it was second nature, moving slow and deliberate, his eyes sharp beneath the brim. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "Can you help me? I'm lost." The man stopped, studying me for a moment before dismounting. He was older than me, maybe early 30s. His face was rugged, carved by weather and work, but his eyes were Calman earthy green that felt oddly grounding. "You're on Forest Service land," he said, voice low and steady. "This area's not for tourists. What are you doing out here alone?" I tried to laugh, but it came out more like a sob. Long story short, I was trying to be adventurous. Turns out I suck at it. He smirked, and for a second, the tension cracked. "You're lucky I came by. Storm's coming in fast." He held out his hand. "Name's Luke." I hesitated before shaking it, feeling the roughness of his calloused fingers against my soft, city hands. "Ethan." "Ethan," he repeated, like testing the sound. "Well, Ethan, if you don't want to be bare food tonight, get on the horse." That's how it started, the strangest, most intoxicating detour of my life. The horse's name was Whiskey, and Luke rode like he was part of the forest, silent, precise, unfazed by the cold. I clung to him awkwardly from behind, trying not to think about how close we were or how good he smelled, like pine and rain and something I didn't know how to name. We rode through streams and muddy trails until we reached a small cabin tucked between the trees. Smoke drifted from the chimney. Inside, it was warm, rustic, and smelled of cedar. Luke lit a lantern and hung his coat on a peg. "Sit by the fire," he said. "You look like a drowned raccoon." "Thanks," I muttered, wringing out my jacket. "You always this charming?" He shot me a teasing look. "Only when I'm rescuing idiots." I wanted to argue, but my lips were too cold. He tossed me a towel and a flannel shirt that was way too big but smelled incredible. As I sat by the fire, feeling the heat crawl back into my bones, I couldn't stop glancing at him, his strong hands, the quiet way he moved, the faint scar on his jaw. He didn't seem like someone who belonged to the same world as me. He belonged to the woods, to the silence. "So," he said after a while, sitting across from me, "what's your story, city boy?" I hesitated. "Heartbreak, ego, stupidity. Pick one." He raised a brow. "All three, huh?" "Yeah. My ex left me for a guy who likes camping. So I thought, why not prove I can do the same? Turns out I can't." Luke chuckled softly. "Guess the forest has a way of humbling people." "Yeah, well, mission accomplished." For a while, we sat in silence, just listening to the fire crackle. There was something strangely peaceful about it. No phone, no noise, just the rhythm of the rain outside and the steady presence of the stranger who just saved my life. When I finally looked up, Luke was watching Menet in a judgmental way, but curious, like he was trying to read a story on my face. "You ever think maybe you're running from the wrong thing?" he asked. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes we chase new places hoping they'll fix us, but they just hold up a mirror instead." That line hit harder than it should have. Maybe because it was true. Over the next few days, the storm didn't let up. Luke said the trails were too dangerous to travel. So I stayed. We cooked together, fixed things around the cabin, chopped firewood well, he chopped. I mostly watched and tried not to die from the sight of his forearms flexing. He told me he used to work in wildfire rescue. Said he left after losing someone on his team. Couldn't do it anymore, he admitted one night, his voice barely above a whisper. The noise, the pressurite gets inside you. I didn't push him for more, but something in his eyes told me he carried ghosts too. And then there were moments, tiny, electric ones. Our hands brushing while passing a mug. The way his gaze lingered when I laughed. The silence between us growing heavier, warmer, until it was no longer just silence. One night, while the rain pounded on the roof, the power went out. We lit candles, the flickering light painting gold across his face. He looked at me, eyes soft, hesitant. Must be strange for you, he said. Stuck here with a stranger in the woods. I smiled faintly. Depends on the stranger. He laughed quietly, but there was a tremor in it. You don't seem scared. I admitted. Now, not so much. Luke's jaw tightened like he was holding something back. Then he stood, moved closer, and crouched by the fire next to me. The warmth between us was thick, almost unbearable. I'm not good at this, he murmured. At letting people in. Maybe that's because you live in the middle of nowhere, I teased gently. He smiled barely, but it was real. Then his eyes met mine again, and for the first time, I saw the storm in them. That night, I dreamed of rain, horses, and hands I couldn't hold. When I woke, Luke was gone. A note sat on the table. Went to check the river. Back by noon. I folded it and stared out the window at the fog. Something in me hurt in a way I couldn't explain. Maybe because for the first time in years I wasn't thinking about Ryan. I was thinking about a man who saved me, then saved me again just by being kind. But as the hours passed and Luke didn't return, my worry grew. By sunset, panic had replaced warmth. That's when I saw Whiskey's tracks leading toward the riverbank. I followed them through the mud, calling his name. Luke! Luke! When I reached the river, I froze. His horse was tied to a tree, but Luke was nowhere in sight. Luke! I shouted again, heart hammering. And then somewhere beyond the bend I heard it. A shout. A splash. I ran. Luke was knee-deep in the freezing river when I found him, wrestling with something tangled in the current. For a horrifying second, I thought it was a body. But as I got closer, I realized it was a fallen Loga, massive one, wedged against the rocks. He was trying to pull something free from beneath it. Luke! I yelled, splashing toward him. What the hell are you doing? He turned, soaked and shivering, his hat gone, hair plastered to his forehead. Trapped deer, he shouted back. Got caught in the current. Can't leave it. Through the swirling water, I saw Ida, young deer, trembling, one leg pinned under the log. Its eyes were wide with terror, but still alive. You're gonna freeze to death, I cried, but Luke didn't stop. Without thinking, I waded in beside him, the cold slicing through me like knives. We braced ourselves against the current and pushed. The log shifted inch by inch until finally it rolled free. The deer kicked, stumbled upright, and bolted into the trees. Luke leaned against a rock, panting. I grabbed his arm, steadying him. Jesus, I said. You're insane. He laughed weakly. Maybe. But I couldn't just let it die. We stood there, soaked to the bone, breathing hard. The rain had stopped, and for the first time, sunlight broke through the clouds, just a sliver, but enough to paint everything gold. That moment felt unreal. The sound of the rushing water, the smell of wet pine, his hand still gripping mine, all felt too alive, too sharp. Then Luke met my eyes, and the world seemed to quiet. Thank you, he murmured. I wanted to say something, anything, but words didn't fit. I just smiled, the kind of small, stupid smile that says everything you're too scared to. He looked away first. We should get back before dark. Yeah, I said softly, still catching my breath. Let's go home. By the time we returned to the cabin, we were frozen. Luke built a fire, the orange light flickering against his wet clothes. He stripped off his jacket, then his shirt, revealing lean muscle, scars, and the faint trail of water down his chest. I turned away fast. Too fast. Cold? He asked, noticing the way I hugged myself. I'm fine, I lied. He smirked, pulling a blanket from the shelf and tossing it at me. You're shivering like a leaf. Caught it, grateful but flustered. You, should change too. He shrugged. You think I'm modest? That laugh of his low, teasing, warm did something to me I wasn't ready to name. He turned away to grab dry clothes, and I caught myself staring. There was something magnetic about him, not just the way he looked, but the way he was. Solid. Grounded. Like the world could fall apart, and he'd still be standing. When he sat across from me again, his hair was still damp, falling into his eyes. The silence stretched, heavy but comfortable. You really live out here alone? I asked finally. Mostly. He poked at the fire with a stick. There's a ranger station a few miles north, but I prefer quiet. Doesn't it get lonely? He looked up, his eyes catching the firelight. Sometimes, but loneliness isn't always a bad thing. You can hear yourself think. I nodded slowly. I used to think the city noise made me feel alive, but lately, it just feels like static. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's why you came here. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just wanted to see if I could survive without Wi-Fi. That made him laugh again, soft and genuine. Well, so far, you're doing better than most. Over the next few days, we fell into a rhythm. Morning coffee by the river, chopping wood, cooking together in that little kitchen with the cracked window. It felt domestic, absurdly so, like we'd slipped into a version of life that wasn't real, but somehow felt more true than anything I'd ever known. Luke didn't talk much about himself, but every once in a while pieces slipped through. His mother used to ride horses competitively. His father was a forest ranger who died in a wildfire when Luke was 16. He joined the service after that like it was destiny. And when I quit, he said one night, staring into the fire, I thought I'd lost my purpose. Turns out, maybe peace was the purpose all along. I wanted to tell him he hadn't lost anything, that maybe his purpose had changed but it was still there. Instead, I just reached across the table, my fingers brushing his hand. He didn't pull away. Outside, the rain began again, soft this time, steady. Luke looked at me for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then, quietly, he said, You don't have to go when the storm clears. The words hit like a spark. Stay, I asked, my voice small. He nodded once. If you want. The air between us thickened. The fire cracked, a soft glow painting the room in gold and amber. I could feel his heartbeat in the silence, even from across the room. Luke, I whispered. He didn't answer. He just stood, stepped closer, and for a second, the world narrowed to the space between us, the warmth, the breath, the trembling that neither of us wanted to admit. When he finally kissed me, it wasn't perfect. It was hesitant, rough, tasting of smoke and rain. But it was real. It was alive. The kiss deepened, his hand cradling the back of my neck, and everything that had been unspoken poured out: fear, desire, gratitude, hope. When we finally pulled apart, I was shaking. Are you okay? He asked softly. I nodded, unable to speak. He smiled a little, brushing his thumb across my jaw. Good, 'cause I don't want this to be something you regret. I won't, I said, and I meant it. The next morning, the world was brighter. Sunlight spilled through the trees, birds singing like the forest had forgotten the storm. Luke was outside feeding whiskey when I stepped out, barefoot, still wearing his flannel. Morning, I called. He turned, that faint smile already tugging at his lips. You sleep okay? Better than I have in months. He nodded toward the trees. Come on. I want to show you something. We hiked for about 20 minutes, following a narrow path that led uphill. When we reached the top, I stopped dead. Below us, the valley stretched out in a sea of green, with the river winding like silver ribbon through the trees. Wow, I breathed. Luke stood beside me, his gaze distant. Whenever life got too loud, I came here. reminded me that the world's bigger than whatever mess I was in. It's beautiful, I said. And terrifying. He laughed softly. That's nature for you. We stood there for a long time just taking it in. I felt something shift in Mesamething, quiet and fragile. Maybe it was peace. Or maybe it was the realization that I didn't want this to end. But life doesn't wait for you to figure it out. That afternoon, while we were chopping wood, Luke's radio crackled to life. Station 4 to Walker, you copy? Luke froze, axe mid-swing. He grabbed the receiver. Walker here. Got word from the park service. Big storm front moving in from the coast, stronger than the last one. You need to head out, we're closing access roads tonight. He looked at me, jaw tight. Copy that, he said into the radio. I'll be out before sundown. When he hung up, the silence was deafening. So, that's it? I asked quietly. We leave. He nodded. It's not safe here during a flood. Roads'll wash out. You'll need to get to town. And you? I'll help the rangers set up blockades. I have to stay a few days. I swallowed. Then I'll stay too. He shook his head immediately. No, you don't understand. It's dangerous. I don't care. My voice cracked. Luke, I can't just leave you here. His eyes softened, but there was steel in them. Ethan, you have to. I turned away, angry at him, at the world, at the fact that for once I'd found something that felt real and it was slipping away. He came up behind me, resting a hand on my shoulder. You don't owe me anything, he said quietly, but promise me you'll go. I blinked back, tears. What if I don't want to go? He smiled sadly. Then I'll come find you. I promise. We packed what little I had into his truck. The drive down the mountain was silent except for the rumble of thunder in the distance. When we reached the ranger station, he stopped the truck, leaving the engine running. This is where we say goodbye, he said softly. Don't make it sound like forever, I whispered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a silver compass, old and worn. My dad's, he said, pressing it into my hand. So you never get lost again. I looked down at it, my throat tightening. Luke. But before I could finish, he leaned in and kissed me, gentle this time, almost fragile. Take care of yourself, city boy. I wanted to tell him I loved him, that maybe I'd always love him. But the words wouldn't come. So I just nodded, stepped out of the truck, and watched as he drove away, disappearing into the mist. The storm came that night, violent, relentless. I stayed in a small roadside inn, listening to the rain hammer the roof, clutching that compass like a lifeline. And when the morning came, I made a decision. I was going back. The storm had torn the forest apart. Trees lay across the road like broken matchsticks, and the river had swallowed parts of the trail. But I didn't care. I had to find him. I left the rental car at a blocked bridge and hiked the rest of the way on foot, my clothes soaked, my boots sinking into the mud. Every step felt like a fight against the earth itself, but I couldn't stop. Luke! I shouted into the storm. Luke! The wind swallowed my voice, but I kept going, following my memory, following the compass he'd given me. The forest was unrecognizable now, dark, twisted, alive with the sound of falling branches and distant thunder. Then, faintly, I saw smoke. Not from a fire but from a chimney. I stumbled toward it, heart pounding, until the cabin appeared through the mist, battered but standing. I ran the last few yards, slamming the door open. Luke! The fire was burning low. His jacket hung by the door. For a moment, I thought maybe I was too late. Then I heard movement from the back room. He stepped out, limping slightly, bandage on his arm, but alive. Ethan? His voice broke on my name. Before he could say anything else, I crossed the room and threw my arms around him. He froze for half a second, then held me tight, his hand tangling in my hair. I thought you left, he said, voice shaking. I did, I whispered against his chest. Then I realized I'd rather be lost with you than found without you. He pulled back just enough to look at me, eyes full of disbelief and something deeper. You're insane. Yeah, I breathed. Guess you're rubbing off on me. He laughed, rough and low, before pressing his forehead to mine. The storm outside roared like the world was ending, but in that tiny cabin, everything finally felt still. We spent the night tending the fire, patching leaks, and holding on to each other like the world outside didn't matter. Luke told me how he'd gone to help the Rangers clear a landslide, but got caught when a tree fell. He'd managed to make it back before the worst of the storm hit. I thought I was gonna ride it out alone, he admitted. Didn't think anyone would be stupid enough to come find me. Well, I said, smiling weakly, guess you underestimated how bad I am at letting go. He shook his head, eyes glinting in the firelight. You really came back for me. I told you I would. Something in him broke then, not in a painful way, but like a wall giving in after years of holding too much weight. He reached for me again, this time with no hesitation. The kiss was slower, deeper, filled with everything we'd been too scared to say. The rain drummed against the roof like a heartbeat, the fire crackled, and for once, there was no need for words. When he pulled away, he whispered, "You don't know what you're signing up for." I smiled softly. Try me. The storm passed by morning, leaving behind a silence so pure it almost hurt. The sky was washed clean, and the forest glistened under the weak sunlight. We stepped outside together, the air crisp and cold. Luke looked at the wreckage around us, the fallen trees, the swollen river, the broken fence, and sighed. Gonna take weeks to fix this. I'll help, I said automatically. He raised an eyebrow. You, Mr. City boy who thought trail mix was a meal. Laugh all you want. I shot back, grinning. But I'm serious. I want to stay, at least for a while. He stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for doubt. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything, I said quietly. I came out here to prove something to myself. But I think what I found was peace. And you. He looked away then, blinking like he was trying to process it all. When he finally looked back, his eyes were softer than I'd ever seen. Then I guess I'm not arguing with that. Days turned into weeks. We repaired fences, cleared debris, and rebuilt the cabin's porch. I learned how to saddle whiskey, how to split wood without losing a finger, and how to listen to silence without feeling empty. Sometimes at night, we'd sit on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. Luke would point out constellations, telling me the names his father used to use: the hunter, the mare, the lantern boy. One night, I said quietly, "You ever think about going back? To firefighting?" He hesitated. Sometimes, but I think I was trying to save everyone except myself. I turned to him, and now I'm learning how to stay. He smiled then, small but real, and for once, I didn't need to fill the silence. It was enough just to sit there, side by side, the world stretching out infinite and quiet before us. Spring came early that year. The forest came alive again, green, wild, beautiful. Tourists started returning, and sometimes Luke would ride into town to help the Rangers. I'd wait for him on the porch, pretending to read but really just listening for the sound of hooves. He'd always return with that same quiet smile, the one that said more than words ever could. We never really labeled what we were. There was no need. Love in the woods didn't need definitions, it just was. One morning, while we were drinking coffee by the fire, Luke said, "I've been thinking. That's dangerous," I teased. He rolled his eyes. "About us." That made me freeze. "Oh." He set his mug down, looking nervous in a way I'd never seen. "You don't have to stay here forever, Ethan. I know you have a life out there. Friends, work, a world bigger than this." I took his hand across the table. I had all that, and still felt empty. But here, I looked around at the cabin, the fire, him. Here, I feel like I belong. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he squeezed my hand. "Then I guess I'm lucky you got lost." We didn't realize how symbolic that compass had become until months later. We were riding through the forest together, the air warm and filled with birdsong, when Luke's horse suddenly spooked at something, a flash of movement, a snapping branch. Whiskey reared, and Luke lost his grip, falling hard onto the trail. My heart nearly stopped. Luke! I jumped off and ran to him. He was dazed but breathing. Should have seen that coming, he groaned. Whiskey hates snakes. Don't scare me like that again, I said, voice trembling. He grinned, even through the pain. Guess now you're the one rescuing me. We laughed, half from relief, half from sheer adrenaline. Later that night, when he was resting by the fire, I held the compass again, tracing the scratches along its surface. It had guided me through storms, mud, and madness, but maybe, just maybe, it had been guiding me to him all along. A year passed before we ever left Oregon together. We drove south one summer, along the coast, windows down, country songs humming through the speakers. The world outside the forest felt louder, faster, but I wasn't scared anymore. We stopped at a lookout over the Pacific. The sun was setting, the sky burning orange and pink. Luke stood beside me, wind in his hair, that same quiet strength in his posture. I used to think I'd never leave those woods, he said softly, but I guess I just needed a reason to. I slipped my hand into his. And did you find one? He looked at me, that half-smile curving at the edge of his mouth. Yeah, found one that won't stop following me. I laughed, leaning my head against his shoulder. Good, 'cause I'm not planning on letting you go. We went back to the cabin after that because somehow it always pulled us home. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't big, but it was our place built from storms and second chances. Sometimes, when the rain came, we'd sit by the fire again, remembering that first night. I'd tease him about calling me an idiot, and he'd grin, saying, well, you were. But sometimes, when the laughter faded, he'd look at me with that quiet, almost reverent expression, the one that said he still couldn't believe I'd come back. And I'd whisper, I'd get lost 1,000 times if it meant finding you again. He'd pull me close, kiss my forehead, and the forest would hum around Usalive, endless, hours. Years later, people would ask how we met. We'd exchange a glance, half embarrassed, half proud. I got lost, I'd say. And I found him, Luke would add. But the truth was simpler. The forest didn't just swallow might rebuilt me. Taught me that love doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it waits. Sometimes it wears muddy boots and smells like rain. And sometimes, when you think you're lost, it finds you exactly where you're supposed to be. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.